So,
I don't deny that there's, aluminum powder, a reason for having aluminum powder and iron oxide in the dust. I don't deny that.
he says you deny molten metal running
Well,
away.
first of all, look at his thing about thermite in the dust. The dust has in it lots of stuff, including iron oxide and aluminum powder. But to extrapolate from there and make the leap, fill in this gap with speculation, and say that somehow that proves what happened to buildings, that is no different than saying I found steel dust, steel particles in the dust. So therefore, in knowing that that steel makes up what scissors are, that proves that scissors cut up the building. It's identical in logic.
Yeah.
Just because you found, various ingredients in the dust, you can find all sorts of stuff because everything that was in the building, if the building turned to dust, and I think he's now coming to the point of admitting that, if the majority of the building turned to dust, you're going to find every constituent of the building in the dust. So how do you determine what's attributed to what?
Absolutely.
I'm sure that I'm sure there's steel filings in there that are from scissors, because everything just about turned to dust. The majority of the building turned to dust.
You talk about chocolate chips in the dust because there were obviously chocolate chip cookies in there, but that could have come from a chocolate chip muffin, a chocolate chip cake. You don't even know where it comes from.
It doesn't even say that they're combined as cookies. Yeah. You have. Well, I could actually read that portion. Let's see. Got the earmark here. Okay, the buildings were turned to dust, and therefore the dust would be expected to contain all traces of all materials that were in the buildings. Finding traces of chocolate, sugar, and nano-wheat, in other words flour, in the dust would not prove that chocolate chip cookies turned the buildings to dust. It would not prove that the ingredients had even been combined as chocolate chip cookies in the buildings, nor that such cookies were capable of turning the building to dust. The same is true for thermite. Finding constituents of the building in the dust does not give proof of what happened to the buildings. In this case, focusing on particular constituents found in the dust and claiming that those constituents support a particular theory may actually distract attention away from the central and incontrovertible fact that most of the buildings and its contents were quite simply turned to dust.
Absolutely, you don't even know how these things are put back together.
Yeah, that's why I say finding steel dust doesn't mean that scissors. They were combined as scissors to cut the buildings. And I've seen some of the thermite folks say, "Well, it shouldn't have been there." Right, the building shouldn't have been turned to dust. Or also, chocolate chip cookie remnant shouldn't have been there because Susie Jones up there on the 85th floor was on a diet, so she shouldn't have had cookies in her dust. Where do you stop? Saying it shouldn't have been there.
Yeah. Okay. I was what does Richard Gage say you deny? The molten metal. He says you deny the molten metal. Do you see molten metal?
I don't say I deny molten metal. I wouldn't say I deny molten metal. I say there's no evidence for hot molten metal. I say hot things glow, but not everything that glows is hot. And if you see something glowing that's rolling over a piece of paper and the paper isn't burning, I think it's pretty safe to conclude that stuff is glowing for a reason other than being hot.
Yep. And the idea that there's rivers of molten iron underneath the Trade Center.
We're going back to 2006 now when I say, it was flowing. And it was still flowing after 6 weeks, Stephen Jones would say. And I'd say, okay, does it flow down in the morning and up at night? Or does it flow in the tributaries out to the ocean? I mean, where's it flowing after 6 weeks?
Yeah.
If you have rivers of molten metal, where's it go? If you try to run it underwater, it's going to be bubbling up and doing a steam explosion. Yet we have lakes of water where firefighters are walking around in knee-deep water on the afternoon of 9/11. They don't look like boiled chicken. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
obviously
the
not
idea
hot
that
water.
the idea is molten metal. If there were molten metal, there would be no pools of water. The water would
If
just
it was
boil
hot
away. So
molten, if it was hot molten metal, the
yeah,
high heat, stories, just because it gets repeated over and over again, or because a first responder interpreted that way. That's just like, you've heard the George Stephanopoulos clip where he says he asked a volunteer, one volunteer, Robert Galinsky, explained the building all fell down into the ground, was pulverized, evaporated. Well, does that prove that the building was evaporated? No, that's his interpretation, the best he could do at that time, because he's
yeah,
explaining what you see in that testimony of his is that there's not enough material there to what you'd expect to see, and he's doing the best he can to explain it away, but that doesn't mean that he's a scientist and has determined that. So hearing explosions going off doesn't mean that bombs were used.
no, we started off with that. We started that.
Yeah.
We started that with the episode
But
with that.
it's the same theme. Just because somebody identifies a sound doesn't prove what caused the sound. The same with identifying a lack of building doesn't mean what happened to the building. Or it's when people start making this leap. As I often say, know what it is that you know that you know that you know, and know that everything else you don't know, and don't fill in that gap with speculation, guesses, and assumptions, because then you're just solving an imaginary problem, not a real problem.
Well, the architects and engineers can do a nice little trick here on the witness testimonies, because they can not lie to you, and they can say, right, there's 503 testimonies, and there's 118 of these testimonies contain the word explosion, but
Right.
they're not giving you any context for that. So that's
Right. Let's
so
name some of the things that exploded were people hitting the ground.
Well,
People
like I
went out
say,
the windows, hit the ground. They said that they exploded when they hit the ground. That doesn't mean it was a bomb.
one of the first ones I saw, as I was going down the list a few hours ago, one of the first ones on the list, it says explosions. It sounded like an oven. It doesn't sound like a bomb. So if you actually read what they actually put it in context of what the person was saying, if you just pull out the word explosion, and that's what Richard Gage is doing. He's just pulling out the word explosion and saying there's so many people mentioning the word explosions, but you've got to read exactly what they're saying and say, oh, right, well, does that make me think like a bomb? It doesn't make you think like a bomb, does it? It makes you think like whatever they're saying. They're there. They're.
He's quote mining.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just
And
gathering
taken out of context, just like the Larry Silverstein quotes that often get referred to, and there's
the pullet.
Yeah, then there's the pullet. There's the BBC person, and I don't know if you were ready to talk about that, Matthew, the BBC thing. Yeah.
Oh,
the
James
woman, yeah. Yeah, that often is cited as some kind of evidence of whatever, but if you stop and quit jumping to conclusions and stop and figure out what exactly you have evidence of. You have evidence of someone prematurely announcing that the building blew up. Okay, are they saying that she was handed a script to read? For what purpose? To out the fact that there was foreknowledge? That's kind of dumb. Or why would she be handed a script that she was supposed to read in a half hour? Why did she be handed that script early? For what reason? To make sure she announced it? Why not just wait till the building goes and then announce it then?
Yeah, just do it naturally.
Yeah, and so actually she wasn't the first one to say that. Another network said it. And she just, maybe that network thought that nobody knows what's going on there. They're just jumping on whatever story. And the one that I like to present is the premature announcement that One Liberty Plaza collapsed. Yeah, it's still standing. So I guess it's premature announcement, but it's still standing. We're still waiting for it to go. But so many people jump on that one that because they're projecting on that the media's at fault. The media did it. They're busy putting blame first rather than looking at what the evidence is saying. The evidence is clear that she misannounced it. And then I've got this other clip where right when Building 7 does go, and the person said, oh, no, but it already went. They don't know which building's which. And if there, foreknowledge isn't going to, you're telling me you have some top secret, need to know basis operation going on, and you're going to leak it to the press to prematurely announce that Building 7 went?
Well, this is where I've got the clip here in front of me, the CNN clip. So,
the Israeli foreign minister, a long time Israeli leader in any number of governments, joining us from Jerusalem tonight, where it is a little bit after 11 o'clock, about 10 minutes after 11. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I. But building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the 2 towers, but then there are a number of support buildings around it, retail spaces, restaurants, office space, garages. The trains come in from New Jersey, bringing commuters, taking commuters back, come into the complex that is the World Trade Center, and now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see.
so that could be that story could have come out, and then BBC just latched onto it. They haven't said it's collapsed. They're saying it may collapse.
Yeah, if you have all that, the fumes coming out of the building and things falling apart inside the building was disintegrating all afternoon. It doesn't take much brain power to conclude that building is going to come apart at some point if it's disintegrating all afternoon.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you put a balloon on a puddle of acid that eats, the rubber balloon, at some point that balloon's going to pop. It's just eroding the outer surface of the balloon. Or putting something in the sun that is going to cause something to rupture. Or how about if you put a soda pop can in your freezer? At some point, it's going to explode. So it's something that you can kind of extrapolate as to what's happening, because it is losing structural integrity all afternoon.
Yeah, it's really weird that the BBC gets slammed for that, and then the CNN
and not
report
CNN.
gets nothing.
And not CNN.
Yeah, it gets nothing.
But why don't people make a big deal of One Liberty Plaza being prematurely announced as collapsing? It even says on the thing at the bottom of the screen, confirmed, partial collapse of One Liberty Plaza. It hasn't collapsed.